Before we get into this week's episode, Blue Cabin Publishing have asked me to talk to you about my new book, Find Your Freedom. It's time to write your own blueprint. Available to buy right now on Amazon in both paperback and ebook. This is a book for those feeling lost, stuck, disengaged, and diminished. It's for those who've reached a point in their life and are thinking there has to be more. There can be, and this book will offer you a perspective and toolkit to pursue it. So if you are living a miserably successful life or feel root bound, that sense that the life you have is constricting you and giving you no further space to grow, then get your copy of Find Your Freedom today. It might just be the catalyst you need. Right. Back to me and my fantastic guest on this week's episode of the Hands Up If You're Human podcast. Hello and welcome to the Hands Up If You're Human podcast, an ongoing series of conversations dedicated to exploring the messy reality of being human. The truth is, there is nothing we can think, say, feel, do, or experience that isn't 100% human. So it's time to drop the shame and the guilt, embrace everything that we are, and can't remember the end of my intro.
Just go with it.
Can't remember, but we should drop the shame and the guilt.
Shame and the guilt. Just
embrace everything that we are and start to create the life we really want to live.
That's the one.
My name is Wyndham. I am the Blueprint Coach, and today I am joined by a very special guest. With more than 20 years in academia, my guest today is Vice Dean of Research at Brunel Business School, Professor of Technology and Society at Brunel University London, Executive Committee Member at Leisure Studies Association, Strategic Advisor to Surrey Cultural Partnerships, Member of the Board of Directors at Visit Surrey. She is an artist. She is the volunteer host of mental health swims and recently a podium topper at a Welsh open water swim. It is my great pleasure to welcome to the show Caroline Scarles. How are you, Caroline?
Do you know what? I'm a person. I'm just a person. I'm a person. Do you know, I'm really good. I'm really good. I've done that classic kind of, you know, in my career in life, we were introduced. And you do that immediate thing of, oh my God,
yeah,
don't do that. Stop. You know, and you just go into this cringe space. And I think there's almost this weird, it's a really strange space of really don't, please stop. And then it's like, no, actually, that's me. And it's about owning it. And it's about not being apologetic for who we are. And it's not about kind of going, oh, but it's not all that.
Yeah.
Because actually it is, because it's me, and it is because it's you, and it is because whatever life we're living, we should be proud of that.
Completely agree. Yeah. And I really love, I happened upon this as an introduction.
Well, I was going to say, did you like Google me or something?
Because I did, yeah. But in general, I like it because it's only ever part of the story. Because these are the kind of the big labels that are very public. Which brings me to my first question, which is what is missing from that list?
I'm a mum, I'm a wife. But actually, even like saying wife, there's so many, and I know we'll probably get into all this, but there are so many labels in our world. And actually, for me, what I'm trying to do at the moment is be the truest person and the truest self I can be.
Yeah.
And that's what I am. And that means that I have to be lots and lots of different things. So I have to be a life partner. I have to be a mum. I've got teenage twins. Deep breath. It's all going okay. So far, so good. You know, I'm a friend. I'm a swim sister. I'm a confidant. I'm a leader. I'm a mentor. and then I think that's kind of. It's taken a long time for me to be able to get to the point where I not only say these things, but I truly mean it.
Right.
I truly mean it, because, you know, obviously people will be familiar with your story now and the kind of the idea of being miserably successful. Something I can completely resonate to, you know, because you don't get to being Professor and Vice Dean Research. See, I even put on a funny voice when I say it. I can't even say
you want to be taken seriously.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a Professor and Vice Dean.
I need to sound stuffy.
I need to sound a little bit more serious. And but it is about embracing that. And for me, a lot of it is also been about breaking stereotypes. So in my previous university, I was the first female head of school for my particular discipline. I was one of the first female, myself and my colleague, we were the first female professors appointed in our discipline at the university. And so for me, there's a lot of kind of, yeah, it was about breaking stereotypes. You know, when I tell people I'm a professor, they kind of laugh and they come, no, I am,
Yeah.
seriously, you know, because you will equally find me happy in a space when I'm in cold water, when I'm swimming in ice, when
It's
I'm, yeah.
yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because we it isn't just our own version that you know, you were saying you feel like you have to be more serious and
Mhm.
conform to a stereotype of what that thing is, because we we got to know each other completely outside. We're
We're
neighbors, so
completely, yeah,
we're
friends and neighbors,
completely
yeah,
outside
definitely, yeah.
um of a work environment. And I think I was introduced to you as, or my introduction to you was artist, swim host.
Mm.
I think the first story I heard about you was I can't remember who told it to me, but the idea of you taking a mini hatchet down to Frensham
Yeah.
Ponds to crack through the ice for a
You
winter
swim.
swim.
Yes, absolutely. Because
And
why wouldn't you break ice with a hammer and go
yeah,
swimming? Yeah,
and then it was only after that that your professional career
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
came into it. And interestingly, it was I didn't have that kind of, oh, she's a professor.
yeah. Okay.
I don't know why that, because I'm as guilty and as
Mm.
prone to stereotypes as anybody, but I think they're fascinating. And your comment about working hard to embody who you really
Mm.
are. I read a quote this morning from Maro Itoje.
Okay.
So for those of you who don't know, he's an England rugby player and he's currently captain of the British and Irish Lions touring Australia. And he had a quote that said, "I am a rugby player, I am an athlete, but that is just what I do.
Mm.
It is not who I am." And it's so easy for us to attribute the label to be the
Be the
person.
whole person.
Yeah, and
And
it's
I
not
think
true.
that's what that and that's where, you know, I teach for I taught for so I was at the University of Surrey for almost 20 years, and throughout that time I taught a first year class on cross-cultural issues. Can't believe that's even made it into our conversation, but it has, you know. So and in that I talk about stereotypes. And again, it's that stereotypes are a very good starting point,
Yeah,
but that is where they should end. You know, and it gives you a okay, I now think I know what. At least I've got a tiny little jump off point
yeah,
that gives me a point of reference. If you use them for any more than that, you're stuffed. You're absolutely done because one, you may end up being derogatory or bigoted, or you know, or you just again, you just shut yourself off to learning and exploring and understanding things differently, and that's where it just becomes it would actually just be really disappointing if you did that, you know.
yeah.
And so I think for me, that whole kind of who I am and the labels, you know, it's the other thing that again is had a significant impact in terms of how I look at myself is I'm now going through the process of diagnosis for ADHD. And that in and of itself is fascinating because all of a sudden I've gone with so many other 40, mid 40 odd year old women going, oh,
Hmm.
right. I don't just have anxiety. And I don't, because, you know, I would literally be living with panic attacks every day of my life from the age of about 15 years old and just having that as normalized. So I just thought everyone went around having panic attacks every day and everybody goes around with like 100 million thoughts racing in their head every single moment, that everyone catastrophizes everything, that everybody masks everything, and everybody just, you know, goes on and gets on. And obviously they don't. And we know they don't. And I think now there's a bit of a danger actually where we're hearing more conversations and more in the news and media, etc., about, you know, later diagnosis ADHD. And thank God that mental health is beginning to get the kind of the airing and the discussion and the visibility and the focus that it requires because it is still so under researched, it is so unknown. And yet we're now all of a sudden at the same time hearing these people going, oh yeah, but everybody's on the spectrum. No, they're not.
Yeah.
No, they're not.
What's really interesting, and I think it ties two points together, is you were talking about
Mm,
stereotypes and labels, and they are really good as a starting off point. There's just like a little box that you can go, okay, I've got a kind of frame of reference of what this is. If we stop at that stereotype, then a number of things happen. But one of them is we're not opening ourselves to our experience. We are preempting the experience we're going to have.
Exactly.
And we judge, and that kind of brings in a frame of judgment. And judgment is the antithesis of curiosity.
Exactly that.
And so now we've got this, as you say, there is this long overdue expansion of the awareness of mental health and neurodiversity and all the different types and shades of being a human being. And still we're generally in that state of, well, we want a label and we want the label because we don't have to think about this. Whereas actually the label we benefit so much more if we make the label the starting point. And almost, this isn't something I've carried for a while, but it's just something I'm thinking now. Almost like, okay, so this is the label, this is the stereotype. I'm interested in the difference, or where is this experience different from that which I was expecting because of the label? And it might be 5% different. But if we're not looking for the differences in our own experience, then essentially we are deferring our perspective of life to somebody else.
And to be quite frank, those stereotypes come from a very particular viewpoint. They come from a point of privilege. They come from a point of judgment. You know, there's a reason why we need to be breaking down all these isms, because, you know, everything to do with race, with gender, with ethnicity, with religion, we have so many examples, and it is so heartbreaking in so many ways. And actually it's not heartbreaking, it makes me bloody angry, quite frankly, that we use these stereotypes and isms in consistently negative or destructive ways. Thankfully we are seeing such progress. You know, it's Pride Month this month. It's wonderful to see so much advancement in terms of understanding, knowledge, empathy, in terms of breaking down these judgments and creating education and awareness, because that is how we move through from judgment to openness, understanding, appreciation, you know, kindness, you know, and that's at the end of the day what we're talking about. You know, we see all these, like, whether it's t-shirt slogans or whatever it is, it's just be kind. It's not difficult. It's really not. I mean, if you just refine it down to that, you ask like kids, 4, 5, 6-year-olds, and again, we see this, you know, it's like, what makes the world good? But being kind, being nice.
They don't have to try, do they? They just...
Yet we build it into them that actually, no, we say that's what we want to do. And so I think that for me is, you know, in these different roles, one of the things that I've now felt, particularly in the last 3 years or so. So again, I've gone through a big life change. Unfortunately, as you know, COVID hit me really badly, was very ill. I'm like sweeping over it like it was not a major event in my life. I nearly died. That was all great. And I don't want to sweep over that, but it was significantly life-changing, as it was for everybody. We all had our lives significantly changed through that period of time. But what I'd like to kind of just emphasize is that transition. So I still live with long COVID. I still have that. I've recently moved away from the University of Surrey, as you say now, at Brunel University. But I'm now at a point where, through whether it's being ill, finding out more about my own mental health and coming to understand that more, it puts me in a position where I go, okay, I'm not the one that has to find solutions for why I'm broken. Actually, I've turned that completely on its head. So I will go into meetings now, and if it is something that's about idea generation, I mean, I'm an ADHDer. It's like, talk to me about ideas, they'll come off, and I can, when I go into I can just generate stuff like nobody's business. So it's like that kind of, I now give people a heads up. You know, it's like, oh, by the way, just to let you know, I'm undergoing diagnosis for ADHD, so I will work really quite fast when we do this. I will come up and do this. I work in this way or that way. And they go, thank you. You know, but I'm also very, very aware that that comes from a place where I have got a senior position within an institution. I have got 20 odd years behind me. I've also moved into that space of perimenopausal kind of position where you begin to give no shits. That's quite useful too. But I actually see it as it's my responsibility.
Brilliant.
And I don't see it as society needs me to do this. I'm like, no, I am not someone who will shy away now from being me.
Yeah.
And that's huge.
It's
Yeah.
I don't think there's any broad sweep of the brush. I don't
Mm.
think there's anything bigger
Oh,
because of all the conditioning and because of, you know, the time period we grew up in. None of this awareness. It was all, why are you not fitting in this box?
70s, 80s, 90s. What?
Yeah,
About
exactly.
awareness.
And the fact that you've owned the fact that you are a very senior leader, you've got all this experience, you've been through the mill of not having this support. And actually, I think a lot of the challenge we have is the unexpected. And so if somebody comes in and works in a way that we're not expecting, that's really, we're scrambling.
Yeah.
Whereas if somebody comes in and goes, this is how I'm going to operate in this space, I get it. Some people find it a bit overwhelming. There's no judgment from me of you, but this is how we're going to work. Like you say, people go, okay, cool.
Yeah. Because the other thing that it does is that I find that there's almost like a tension at the moment within the world. And certainly we can talk from a UK perspective anyway, you know, we see a lot more openness, we see a lot more visibility to these issues, to raising awareness for mental health, to, you know, inclusion, and, you know, we've got the whole global complexities of EDI going on at the moment, and, you know, the whole equality, diversity and inclusion. It's not even a sector, it's a right, to my mind, it's just a state of being, and we should all be moving towards that. But of course, the really complex geopolitical systems that we have in the world at the moment mean that is very significantly under threat, and hugely under threat, in a way that we probably would never have anticipated because of steps that have been taken in the US and across the world. And so therefore, in terms of, we have made these advancements, but when we reduce it, and I think when we think about all of these things, we need to think of them at different scales, because ultimately, as humans, and as you said right at the very beginning, everything we do is embedded in us being humans, in our humanness, not our humanity, but in our humanness. And I think because of that, we are always adopting a particular lens or a particular perspective or a particular viewpoint. And we are always, or we're very often, not always, because I can't speak obviously for everybody, but often there's still a veil, and there's always a veil between who we're presenting ourselves as and what we're feeling, you know. So, and quite rightly, I mean, we can't walk into every meeting going, I've just had the most horrific morning. The kids were playing up, they were yelling at each other, I was yelling at them, this is happening, I'm absolutely feeling like shit. You're not going to walk into a meeting like that. That's not going to be productive for anyone. However, what is more productive is being human in these spaces, and giving just a little space. You don't have to sit down and every time you meet with someone for a coffee, or you do, you know, a podcast recording, or I give a lecture or whatever it is, you don't have to sit for the first 10 minutes and go, right, let's have a proper full-on conversation about how we're all feeling. But it's about just breathing, and actually we've got these five senses, you know, let's actually hear what people are saying.
Yeah.
You know, let's actually take that time to stop and listen. One of the things, again, other people who are listening and have got the same kind of neurospiciness, it's that you're always there ready to talk over. Or you've got, no, I've got a great idea. I'm listening to you. I'm looking at you, but I'm not listening to you. And I'm certainly not hearing you because my idea is in my head and I don't want to lose it. But I think part of my responsibility now, as I see it, is to actually listen, to hear what people are saying, to create space to support them to realise their opportunities that they should have. And again, it shouldn't be difficult to do that.
No.
It shouldn't be difficult.
The shouldn't is an interesting word though. It's fascinating because it reminds me of my brother is a consultant anaesthetist,
Mm.
and 3 or 4 years ago, our dad died.
Mm.
And in my brother's first operating list back, the operating team come together beforehand and they have 5 minutes. They talk through complexities of the case, talk through this, talk through that, talk through the other. One of the things they also do is they have a check-in with everybody, just to say, anybody want to tell us anything?
Yeah.
So can we
put this person under?
Yeah. So my,
Yeah.
my brother said, yeah, I want you all to know that my dad died recently. I'm okay here. I know what I'm doing. However, I cannot guarantee my mind isn't going to drift.
Yeah.
And I can't guarantee you aren't going to see me do something a little bit unexpected.
Yeah.
If I do, please call me out.
Yeah.
It might be intentional, but it might not be. And if it isn't, do not feel you can't call me out if you see something you're not expecting. Yeah. And I think it's things like that, like he's not gone into work and said, my dad,
yeah.
and unloaded on everybody. But he has given people context for how he might be that day.
And that's so important, because again, you don't, and we don't need to, and we shouldn't be offloading absolutely everything to everybody we meet. My God, the world will just stop working.
Yeah.
But, just as your brother says, actually, I need you to be aware that I might not be 100% on the ball today.
Yeah.
It's likewise, and it's like, because again, there's when you're I can't say what is it?
Anaesthetist.
Right, so that's a word I can't say. I can say lots of words, but that's a word that I can't say. But again, with titles, consultant, professor, dean, there's
a power hierarchy.
There's a power hierarchy there. And actually one of the things that, and you speak to people I work with, maybe they see it completely differently, but one of the things I will do is I will say, look, if I'm not doing something right, let me know. It was like yesterday, we were having conversations, we're doing a refresh of our research groups and all that kind of thing. I went, I need to, working with people and working to provide and hold space for people to share their ideas, for people to actually, they know more about their research areas than I do. I'm a good strategist, networker, all that kind of, and I'm very good at obviously my own research fields. But when it comes to working with people, it's about recognizing and seeing people and giving them the space to say, and actually giving them the confidence to, and it's not challenging hierarchy, it's not challenging power. Again, it comes back to that recognizing the humanness of all of us. We can only ever come from our own subjective perspective. We can have our own subjective perspectives of what we believe other perspectives are, but again, they're only ever subjective.
Yeah.
And so unless you are prepared to listen to what other people are telling you, and it comes back to what we were talking before about stereotypes and switching, and it could be just an ever so slight kind of adjustment, but it's everything from being prepared to actually have your fundamental views, beliefs, opinions changed, right down to just going, oh, never thought about that before, and not even knowing. It's a fleeting moment of change, but it's about creating the space where you are not impermeable.
Yeah. Okay, so there's so much in all of that. And what I'd like to do is ask you one of my 4 questions.
Go on.
Because what I've heard is you've got to a place where you are, your focus is to authentically be yourself. It is to provide opportunity. It is to listen, to hear, to not be impermeable to change. But that's somewhere you've got to.
Taking 47 years to get there.
Yeah. So my question is, as you know, this season, these conversations are all about finding freedom. What does finding your freedom mean to you?
I think in all fairness, I think finding my own freedom, and speaking very personally to me, is being able to be my true self. That to me, and because freedom to me is not necessarily getting away from something, that kind of that whole to be free. Actually, for me, it's a very fluid concept. It's a very, no, okay, I'm going to try not to go too academic on this one, but
No, go for it.
No.
Do what you need.
but to me, it is very fluid. And I was thinking about this when I was coming over, as I was walking the 20 meters down the road. So it's a lot of time for reflection. And again, it comes back to the scale thing. So there are these fleeting moments of freedom, where if the moments where you're sitting at work or you're sitting in the house, you've just had that kind of sense of just being a little bit kind of claustrophobic, a little bit tied in. And those moments of freedom are maybe where you just give yourself that elusive 5 seconds to look out a window and actually see the tree, the sky, the clouds. And there's so much freedom that you can get in that really small, fleeting moment. And then you take that to the other extreme, which is the freedom to me means being able to have the self-awareness, the trust in myself, a confidence, not a brash, cocky kind of, hey, look at me kind of thing, but just a really humble, quiet, but self-assured confidence that I have worth and I have purpose and I have value. And actually that when you have those things, that's when you mentioned before about the work that the volunteering that I do for mental health swims or the volunteering. I mean, I'm a firm believer that if we have a set of skills, and we all have a set of skills, we should put them to good use if we are able to, and if we have the scope and the space within our lives to do that. I know everybody lives different lives, and I do feel very privileged to be able to spend as much time as I am able to volunteering. But just things like, having that space to then support others to find their freedom. That to me is what it's about. Freedom is being able to get to a place where you have that, yeah, just that chance to be authentically yourself.
Yeah, I love that. It's so what's the word? It's so broad. I think for me to begin with, finding freedom, I've struggled quite a lot with grasping for exactness and absolute understanding.
Yeah.
And I say struggle because the universe is currently unknown, like not completely known.
Hugely
And
though.
I just have this sense that the point of my existence is to embrace everything that is human about me, including my limitations.
Absolutely.
And that grasping for understanding and certainty and precision and nice little boundary to what things mean, I'm never going to get that because the universe is too complex.
But I do wonder, so with your running, for example, so we're both sat here having this lovely conversation, but you run to extreme, I swim to extreme, so we've both got that kind of, so is there something then about freedoms where, so you're right, what I believe to be freedom is a broad concept. However, the mechanisms and the encounters, the experiences that I have to facilitate that sense of, if that's what we mean by freedom, at the end of the day, what do? I go and I get in a lake or a pond, not every day, I don't do it every day, but like last night, over the weekend, I get in a pond, a pool, and that's my freedom. I was just talking to someone this morning about that, and I was like, so again, we're doing a charity swim at the weekend up in Essex, and one of my friends swim, I haven't seen her for a while, and we were just talking about that moment where you get in the water. And for me, see, I've even got to close my eyes because it's all about me, and it's just you get in the water and it's like you push out and you just feel you connect with the water. And there's just something so embodied and beautiful and present. And it doesn't matter what else has gone on in the world. It is literally just me and the water. It's just me and the beautiful little air bubbles. It's just me, and it's me and my fingers. It's me and the position and the angles of my hands. It's how it's the position that I put my body in the water to get the propulsion that I need to be able to swim. It's it's if I'm swimming with friends, it's like I did last night. We just went to Mitchell and we did 2 circuits of the pond, and that doesn't the 2 circuits doesn't matter because we had such a good conversation.
Yeah.
And so that's freedom. And that's freedom in a different way. Freedom for me is also my artwork. It's although I haven't painted for quite a while. But it's all these different, and people talk about meditation and how, in the commercial, if we look now at the commercialized forms of meditation and yoga and everything else. But for me, my meditation is being in water. It's being in my artwork, whatever type of form that is. My meditation is, it's just about being present and being able to just switch off.
Yeah. I felt a little prick of tears in my eyes as you were.
Mm.
I could see you
Yeah.
embodying your mechanism to freedom.
Mm.
And it's such an important thing for me, understanding that anything and everything we do is simply a mechanism
Mm.
in service to something
Yeah.
deeper, a meaning
Hugely.
that is more important to us. For a great many of us, we are caught up in doing things we cannot connect to the deeper meaning of.
Yeah.
There is a deeper meaning. Most of the
But we're very
time,
removed from it.
it's in service to somebody else. And what you've described there is beautiful. And I can see, it's so lovely to see somebody, but also your comment about meditation and the commercialization of these things. I have a theory that, well, it's not my theory, but it's when a new concept comes up, a new concept to whatever group, it's ignored.
Mm.
Then when that concept continues to grow, it's ridiculed.
Yeah.
And when it continues to grow, it
Ooh.
is actively fought.
Yeah. Yeah.
And once it continues to grow, the system adapts and it is commercialized and it is drawn into the overall system that really its origins are against.
Yeah.
And that's where we are with mental well-being, mental wellness, meditation, all those kind of
All
things.
of that kind of thing.
It has become commodified. And what you've just described is, I think, one of the three key things. There are lots and lots of things we can be doing, but three of them: personal advocacy, personal agency,
Yeah.
and discernment.
Yeah.
Well, you haven't sat there and gone, I have to meditate. And so many people get caught up because it doesn't work for them.
This is the thing, and this is what so when we take the session I host for Relax and Flow for Relax and Flow for mental health swims is called Relax and Flow. And we basically sit, there's a group of us, we meet, and it's great. Mental Health Swims is a fantastic, fantastic charity. And we meet, and it's about just holding a safe space, non-judgmental. You come as you are, who you are in that moment. You're witnessed and you're seen. And we spend the first 10 minutes or so just sitting in circle, just not necessarily doing breath work or anything like that. We don't do it, but we just sit in a circle and we meditate. But we do it with traffic noise and bird song and kids screaming because they're on the beach, or people splashing in the water, or other people chatting around us. Because meditation is not, it's going to sound really flippant, but you don't have to be a monk living in a forest to meditate, or in a temple, and I think look, there's a space for all different types of meditations, and we talk about yogas and kundalini and ashtangas and all these different types of things, and we talk about yogis, and we talk about retreats and energies and energetic healings and crystals. I mean, God, crystals over the last few years, I'm a firm believer. Part of my own healing through my long COVID recovery has been energy healing, crystal healing. It has been, and that's something that we've not touched on, but is huge for me, is just having trust in process and energy and not having to control everything. It's huge.
Yeah. So with that, is that something you took a step into? So the energy healing and the crystals, did you take a step into it saying, I'm going to try this and I'm going to persist with it? And or was it you had an experience that had a positive impact, and therefore you're basing it on lived experience, not.
It's a really good question. I'm just trying to see. This is one of my things. My neurospiciness. I don't really remember that much in terms of details. So how did I get into it? So I've always been an empathetic person. I wouldn't list my kind of traits as being empath or anything like that, but I've always had a very strong intuition. I've always had very strong levels of empathy and just tuning, and I don't know.
I want to interrupt there as
Go
well,
on.
because you were talking about earlier about you going through the process of being diagnosed with the ADHD diagnosis.
Yeah.
Does that ability, is that innate or is that developed in a way to
I think
survive? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, so I think, oh, it's going to sound a little bit of a cop out, but I do think it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
Because I just, as long as I can remember, I've just always had that. I've just, yeah. But however, is it part of a kind of masking survival? Quite possibly, yes. Look, I'm at the beginning of my journey in terms of understanding ADHD and traits, and there are some fantastic resources out there. Whether it's podcasts or books, or whether it's ADHD chatter or ADHD love or whatever. And these guys are amazing at what they do, and so I'm kind of using them as quite a lot of sources. And but for me, I think what I've always thought was just me, the more I learn about the neurospiciness that I have, the more I learn that actually, okay, that's a typical trait because of course the traits of ADHD in women are very different to men.
Right.
But it's always been understood as young boy, hyperactive, can't sit still, can't focus.
Surely not the perspective from a male perspective.
I know,
Surely.
it's shocking, shocking. And so now we're beginning to understand actually, okay, so for girls, symptoms manifest generally, as far as I understand it, don't quote me on it, but through puberty into kind of those early to mid late teenage years. Yes, 100% recognize that. And so I think, just to come back to your point about kind of the energy and energetic. So I've always had a kind of, even though I'm an academic professor, social scientist, my work is embedded in lived experiences, lived narratives. I'm a qualitative researcher, so I'm interested in people's lived experiences, their stories, what they, just basically how they've lived and what their experience of a particular area is that I'm researching at that point in time. But then so I've always been interested in just kind of the way in which the world works through lived experiences. And then it was like, oh, okay, well, actually, then when the whole COVID situation arose, I just found myself, we all had we didn't all have a bit more time, but we all had time to spend in different ways, And so one of my very good friends is an energy healer, and I had a session with her. She said, well, why don't you just come over? And I was like, yeah, actually, you know what? That's what I feel at this point in time, that's what I need. And what it did was it just gave me space.
Just that hello was at our cat.
Oh yeah, there's a cat, sorry.
If you're just listening.
If you're the cat.
Destroying. Sorry. Sorry, that's what you felt you needed at the time.
Yeah. And so that's what I felt I needed at the time. And actually what that then gave me the space to do was pay more attention to me and more attention to myself. So within that kind of energy healing, crystal healing space within meditation, it was, I really came to be in that space when I was literally just able to comprehend moving into a full space of active recovery.
Right.
So it was probably about 4 or 5 months after I first contracted COVID. And so it took me that long to even get into a space where I was like, actually, I am well enough to begin to think about, it had been quite medical until then. And So by spending time meditating, by spending time just connecting to energy and connecting to just that essence of self that you can't talk about because we don't have the words to talk about it, because of course it's not been part of our, societal discourse till now. And yet it's been part of our world histories and our, philosophies for millennia.
As long as there have been people.
Exactly. And so, as I say, I personally have found that it's provided me space. And I'm using that word very deliberately because, and again, this is where, so my kind of humanist kind of, there's a real, and you can tell because I'm losing my words. You can always tell when I'm kind of like really not quite worked out, because so my natural inclination is evidence, science, fact.
This is what I was going to ask, because the academic 20-year career
Yeah.
and the woo-woo, and
And it is woo-woo, and I
don't
love it
like the
woo-woo.
term
Yeah. No.
because I hold negative connotations for it, and I used
Like
to
stereotypes.
apply negative connotations to it. And that idea of when did you had you always been open to the idea, or was it something that
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think so, because my family had, without going into it because in too much detail, but my family heritage and history is very much from the land. So on my mother's side, we come from the wee small isles off the west coast of Scotland. From my father's side, we actually come from Surrey. But on his mother's side,
huge estate
over the back here. Yeah, nothing to do. We actually owned them. But but from my mother's side and my father's side, it was very, working long hours and factories, and that it was very West Coast Scotland working class. So that's my background. And so when you have that, my dad was a factory manager, my mum retrained and became a teacher, and incredibly incredibly rewarding for us as kids to be able to have that level of support coming through. But there was no space. So any kind of connection with spirituality we got was through the Church of Scotland.
Yeah.
And and so it just wasn't there. So in a similar way as, we were saying about in the 70s, 80s, 90s, stereotypes, insight into mental health, all of that, it wasn't there.
Yeah.
And the people who were engaging in what we would call woo or spiritual or empaths, they were the hippies.
They were ignored or ridiculed.
Yeah, exactly. And so now, and again, this is where actually commercialization is not always, and I fundamentally believe that commercialization is not always a negative thing. Of course, it's not. Because actually what commercialization can do is normalize things.
Yeah.
And so if you look at now, as we are seeing the rise of voice and power and the women now being more greatly heard within society in a whole range of different ways, as we are now talking more about life change, and we are hearing more, not enough, but we're hearing more about perimenopause and menopause. And I've just come back from the British Society of Gerontology and their annual conference, and again, fascinating because we still live in a structure. So this is what I do as well. I go off in tangents, but that's okay. But we still live in a structure where old age is dictated by pension age. In the UK, it's 65, going up to 67, blah, 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 potentially even higher. Yet, how many people do we know in society that are living perfectly active lives? I mean, it's a bit of an extreme example, but I was swimming at the Surrey County Masters on Saturday. It was a 94-year-old going off the blocks. It was like, what? It's amazing. It's incredible. And yet so the point being is that we are living in a world now where thankfully our perceptions, our understandings, our appreciations are changing. And actually what is potentially even more important is that we have louder voices to advocate for those changes. And we have got people who, like you, like I, like others, who are living through and have lived through the last however many decades, who are actually now seeing the benefit of living in this different way. Because quite frankly, and I say this to my kids, it's like, I want you to create opportunities for yourself. I want you to work hard so that you can have opportunities. As long as you're able to live independently, etc., and kind of keep me in my old life, only thing, obviously not. God, let's not even get started about kind of the challenge.
Well, no, you're going to be
You've got-
94 diving into
I'm
the
going to be
cat-
diving into a pool at 94, so it'll be fine,
Yeah.
fine. And we were joking about that actually. We were like, we've got another 30 odd years and we can still get a really team perfected.
Yeah.
So it was a good old giggle. But the point being, we're now at a point where we are advocating and we are able to advocate more loudly using a wider range of voices. An example of that, which I think was really powerful. Yes, I'm an open water swimmer. I vehemently, I detest with so many others what the government has done, the previous government has done to the waterways, the levels of pollution. And you can, so on the 3rd of November last year, I think it was, there was 15,000 people took to the streets of London to protest against the levels of sewage, pollution, agricultural runoff, etc., that's going into our waterways. Our waterways, there isn't a pretty much off the bat, there isn't a river or waterway, coastal area in England that is safe to swim in.
Wow.
Consistently.
Yeah.
There'll be periods of time where they can. I'm about to swim in one next weekend. We've tested it. At the moment, it's safe. But again, it depends on sewage outflows and all of that kind of thing. And so when you're at those particular events, it was so beautiful, and it really was beautiful in the truest sense of its word, of the word, is that there was people from all walks of life there. And all of these voices were being heard. So it's like now we're seeing an increased range of voices advocating for pride, for gender equality, for racial equality, for and that's where we see the significant step change.
Yeah. It's a fascinating one, isn't it? Because it's always been true that the people have the power. Always been true. The stories we get fed would deny us of that. And it's very easy to get into a situation where they go, well, actually, you know what? I'm afraid of losing what I have rather than gaining something infinitely more valuable.
But we're also using, and we're seeing it. So we also need to challenge how we spread our stories and how we spread our lived experience and how we advocate. So for example, we are seeing a lot more. If you look at things like voice and how we use our voice, so
as in a human voice.
As in human voice, yeah. So, and we use our voice in terms of the experiences that we have and the opinions that we share. If you look at poetry, if you look at music, if you look at all these are very, very powerful ways of having our voices heard. And we see that through the decades. I mean, just last night we were watching the Bob Marley film, and you look at the incredible work that was achieved and still is realized through his work, and so we can explore then different forms of creative expression, whether that's art, as in painting, art and expression, whether that's through performance and dance, whether that's through expression through poetry. There's some incredible poets that are out, well, of course there always have been, but challenging how we are heard and challenging how, because if we think about kind of media and we think about governments and parliaments and, it's very, in essence, it becomes very clinical. It's all full of very well rehearsed performances and behaviors and etiquettes, and when you look in Parliament you see all the bobbing and it's all that kind of, and yes, it's steeped in tradition and it is a very, very core part of our identity as a nation. Of course it is. However, if you look at the demographic of the UK at the moment. I mean, we're sat here in Surrey. Surrey has got a very, well, it's white middle class, everybody's rich.
Yeah.
23.4, 23.8% of our population is non-white, which is above national average. We have got just shy of 20% of our population are living with mental ill health. There's a 10-year difference in life expectancy between one side of the A3 in Guildford and the other. We have got such socioeconomic polarization, even in one of the richest counties.
Yeah.
And you even look down the road at our local food banks. Food banks across the country have never been under such pressure. So actually, when we are talking about freedoms and when we're talking about expressions and when we're talking about building a society that truly embraces who people are, we need to communicate differently. We need to express ourselves differently. We need to encourage, intergenerational communication. We need to encourage, actually, instead of kind of, thinking, well, young people, some of our young people have got the best ideas. They've got the best voices. It's about, to my mind, for us to get kind of freedom, and freedom is understanding, and freedom is empathy, and freedom is all these inclusive elements of a society. We need to be far more inclusive in terms of not just an EDI policy, but actually who we talk to. One of the things I love, and actually now that I'm saying this, I'm realizing one of the things I absolutely love is the fact that I have got friends of all ages. Some of my closest friends and closest family friends are in their 80s plus. I swim with people regularly who are 15, 20 years older than I am. I swim with people regularly who are 15, 20 years younger than I am. I volunteer in spaces where I meet older adults, and I don't like that term. I meet people from across the age spectrum.
Yeah.
And that to me is what's important, because that's when, to bring this kind of back full circle to when we were first talking about stereotypes, that's when you start actually understanding what life is like.
Yeah. It's that whole, it's the experience. It's your lived experience contradicts the stereotype.
Exactly.
And you go, oh, hang on a minute. I thought you were supposed to be slow and dim-witted because you're old.
Yeah.
I thought you were supposed to be airheaded and dumb because you're young.
Yeah.
Right?
One of my first jobs when I was 15, 16 years old, I got a job in the care home at the end of our road. And it was one of the first ones that I had ever seen in my life. And it was literally at the end of our road. And I went in and I started off as kitchen hand. And it was, honestly, it was one of the best jobs. And if I could get my kids into a space like that, it's just such an eye-opening experience, because it makes you fundamentally realize that everybody has lived a full life. And that everybody has stories to tell, no matter what they may look like now, no matter what kind of stereotype you impose on them now. And the thing that really kind of drew that to me was there was an older lady who, she moved around with such grace. And I just always remember going, wow, she's beautiful how she moves around. And then I got promoted to cleaning. So I was out and I was cleaning rooms and doing laundry and stuff. And I remember first time I cleaned her room, she was a prima ballerina.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa, that is incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And so it's about, one of the biggest things that we have. So one of my areas of research is around kind of older adults, and as I say, I was at the conference last week. And it really doesn't take much to say hello to someone.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much to actually look at someone and see them as a person, and see them as someone who has actually lived a life and take an interest in that.
Yeah. It's such a profound switch in how people think. And certainly for me, I was super judgmental for the majority of my life. and I was convinced I knew, and I didn't need to have a conversation because I knew I could pigeonhole people, and that was fine. Um, and then what I realized was all of that external judgment was coming from a place of internal judgment.
Yeah.
And once I had done enough work on myself to no longer judge myself, it's impossible to judge somebody else. To judge the human that they are. We can hold them accountable for actions.
Yeah, for actions and opinions and
exactly. But the human has did those actions, has that opinion, probably because they lack awareness. However, it is impossible to judge somebody. And that one of the things I've loved about this season of this podcast is exactly having conversations with people who go, fucking hell.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. That's a bit different.
Yeah.
But but it comes back to that point about when you have that confidence, and it's not even the word, and I'm really fascinated by words.
Me too.
And how they're used. Because everyone just goes, oh my God, that's so beautiful. And it's like, nah, that's not really how that word is meant to be used. Yeah. And I know you can sit there and go, yeah, well, you're an academic, you're going to do that. But no, I'm just genuinely fascinated. Yeah. And so things like confidence, again, words are so almost in and of themselves stereotyped in society. So if you're seen to be confident, you're, and it's my job. I have to stand up in front of hundreds of people or 10 people or present to different people. And I can do that, but I can do that because it's my job. It's what
well practiced.
I'm well practiced, yeah. There's a reason why I volunteer to do the announcing at the swim galas because, it's fine. It's what I'm practiced at doing. And it also means I don't have to speak to people because I'm not a people person, ironically. And I genuinely, I do. I sit there and I go, well, that's fine because I've got this little area beside the pool where I sit and I've got the microphone and I've got this and I don't have to talk to anybody else.
A sign up that says commentator in action.
Yeah, I'm not. Commentator is not a people person. So you kind of. And it's funny because that is something where people always go, but you're so extrovert. You're so, and I'm not. I'm absolutely not. I may be ambivert, but I'm not extrovert. I'm absolutely not. So this is where like words like confidence, to my mind, it's less about confidence and more about self-assured.
Yeah.
I trust myself.
Yeah.
I breathe that little bit easier. I breathe that little bit deeper. And I just have there's almost just I'm doing this because I kind of there's almost a settling.
Yeah.
There's a nice settling that has happened just over the last few years. And I mean it really has been. My panic attacks have eased in the last 2 years, 2.5 years. But it is that settling. And I think so when I talk about confidence, I mean that settling.
Yeah. It's what's coming to mind for me when you're speaking about settling and self-assuredness is there's this kind of almost solid ground within us, but we have to find it. We have to unlearn a whole load of things. We have to accept a whole load of things.
Therapy.
We have to forgive a whole load of things about ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
And about the people.
I laugh just because it was such a traumatic process to do that. Because it is.
Yeah.
It's hugely so. You've experienced it through your journey. We all experience it through our journeys. And actually, one of the hardest things, genuinely one of the hardest things I've ever had to do was the work on myself.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to pretend to be something. It's easy to pretend to be somebody else. It's easy to, well, it's not easy, but when I was, we started off by going, oh yeah, first female professor in this, and first female and first
dismissive tone in books.
Yeah. But actually, it takes a lot. It takes a lot of work to do that.
Yeah. But
there is I think when you're masking so much and when you are just kind of pushing and working and just throwing everything you've got into that because you have kind of told yourself that if I'm not this by that, then I'm not successful. And it absolutely is your concept of, being miserably successful.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change a day of it. I've got so much gratitude, grace, and just thankfulness and I really try, and I don't live with regrets. My one regret, however, was that I stopped piano lessons when I was 11. I would really love to just be able to sit down and play a piano. So, but I mean, joking aside, that wasn't a joke, actually. I do
Yeah,
wish
that's
that
a genuine
that was
regret.
a genuine regret. But it's that kind of, okay, it is hard.
Mm.
And I don't want to even begin to make light of how hard it is
Yeah.
to really, and you know it, I know it because we've gone through it, and people listening will know it because are going through it. It is really hard.
It's
And yeah.
that so for me it was a return to my soul,
Mm,
and I had been separated from it.
yeah.
And that there's nobody to blame for that. Like genuine blame. There are people responsible for
Mm,
it. There's no blame. They're all running off their blueprints. They're all running from their fear mind. They're all behaving in the ways they
yeah.
are. But the work required to identify the stories that have
Mm,
worn these smooth grooves in our minds, identify them, challenge them, expose their stress fractures,
mm,
and then remove
yeah.
them is not to be underestimated
Mm,
and 100% worthwhile.
mm. Just simple things. And I never thought I'd even, and this is what I love about these kind of conversations. You never quite know where they're going to go. So, what you were saying there about kind of reconnecting with your soul, for me, it was about actually going back and just having a conversation with my 7-year-old self,
Yeah.
and, my 12-year-old self, my 14-year-old self, and on Saturday after the swimming comp, I was walking over to meet the family. We were over at a friend's for barbecue, and I was walking over. I had a good old chat with her. I was like, "Yeah, we did it. Look at this. This is
Yeah.
awesome." And because, and I think for me, there's not a kind of, when I look back and I kind of reconnect with all these kind of, as you say, these warm paths. I think for me now, I've realized that art and water are my kind of soul spaces, whatever you want to call
Mhm.
them, fit in your own words here kind of thing. But if for me, it's about kind of the word that's coming to my mind at the moment is a meadow. So it's like we have this ground, we have this, and it's about how we then take these trodden paths, and we actually make them flourish, because that's what we should be doing. We There's this really nice space when we talk about. I'm going to go academic again for a minute, but when we talk about sustainable development, when we talk about we the literature started with sustainable development. It then more recently has moved into kind of regenerative, and what actually Flanders was one of the first years ago now, but they started talking about flourish, and actually using kind of ecosystem metaphors to build societies that flourish.
Mm.
And actually that is so powerful in terms of metaphor, in terms of visualization. And for me, so I see this as almost like for me, and this is very personal, so everyone take from it what you will, but for me, it's almost like what's come to my mind is when you were saying about these trodden paths. It's like we've worn that kind of that bare soil, that compacted bare soil that cracks, and the cracks are those kind of stresses and pressures, and it all just gets too much. Whereas for me now, I think there are certain ones that I did hold real resentment and real blame, and actually that's now gone, and
Mhm.
I'm watering and I'm tending those, and they're now becoming their own part of their meadows. They're not like that anymore. And there's something really quite, yeah, pleasing's not the right word, but there's something really quite poetic and beautiful about that, because the other thing that I've noticed as well is that there's a lot of people doing that. It used to be called a midlife crisis,
Yeah.
and it's not. It's, to my mind, it's about midlife opportunity. It's about midlife creativity. It's about actually getting to the point where you go, fuck this shit.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it anymore. And you kind of go, well, what is it I do want to do?
Yeah. It's almost like a midlife reckoning.
Yeah.
that
And it's
leads, if you allow it and you pursue it and you work at it, that leads to creativity and opportunity.
exactly. And this is where kind of that space about, trust in the process and the universe. And one of the things that is part of my kind of journey on this, I remember I was doing one of my a good friend of mine lives down in Cornwall. She runs holistic retreats and absolutely beautiful. So what I've really realized is for me, we started talking about, one of the first questions you asked me was about seasons. And actually how I now I'm beginning to really embed my life is through the Celtic seasons. So like Samhain and Beltane and Imbolc and and
I'm
so
nodding my head like I know.
but again, these are old celebrations of seasons and
Land driven.
solstices, and they're land driven and it's earth driven, and it's not because, well, maybe I am an old hippie and I just didn't, yeah, maybe I am, but and actually, so great, no worries at all. But it's driven by the seasons, the earth, the land, the very natural nature of why and where we exist. And I think if we can just step off this massive world of materialism and commercialization, and I get where it's come from, because we live in societies, and whether that's local or global and everything in between, we have we've evolved as our societies to have to survive, and the way in which we have to survive is now driven by money and materialism, and not obviously not holistic in its entirety, but it is just it's so reassuring to see that more of our younger populations are making choices now. Again, some people may think, well, yes, but we've got the snowflake generation and they're not used to doing anything and they
It's a
just don't want to
nonsense
work,
term.
and it's just ridiculous.
Absolutely.
But actually, what we are doing, and I'm seeing some of my students do this, and I'm not just talking about undergraduate students, I'm talking about PhD students who are coming into academia. And academia, like so many spaces, it is not long holidays, teaching 5 hours a week, and then kicking back and drinking coffee and doing a bit of research every now and again. In academia, there was a research study that was done just as in the cusp of 21, 22. And this report found that 40% of public sector would report mental health, ill
Wow.
health.
Yeah.
In academia, it was 80.
Wow.
It's huge. It's one, we talk about stereotypes. Academia, to my mind, is one of the most understood areas and sectors and careers that we have. It's like my family,
Sorry, understood or misunderstood?
it's understood at least
Okay.
understood and most misunderstood.
Okay. Fine.
Yeah, because so my
Publicly
sister,
misunderstood, but actually research wise,
oh,
really well.
very, very well. Yeah, absolutely. But people say to me, "You're a professor, what does that mean?" They don't know. And there's no kind of fault or anything there. It's just that it's not, so I used to travel all over the world. I used to do all this. My family used to think I worked for the government or something. They were like, "Yeah, you're not really a professor." It's like,
It's a cover
it's a
story.
cover story. It's like, no, I am. I am just professor. It's fine, and
You can just give me a little wink if you were really working for the. Okay.
eh,
Yeah.
but no, and so again, that to me just is like, and how many of us have jobs, because it's another thing that we do. It's like, some of the most rewarding and hardest roles are, nurses, doctors, teachers. How many of us actually know what a teacher does?
Yeah.
We don't. We make assumptions because many of us have got children who go through the school systems, but how many of us actually know what a day's work is for a teacher?
Yeah. Yeah.
How, and it's another thing, because we still live in a world where, I mean, you can again talk about freedoms, but we live in a world where we still have this real dichotomy between work and home and play
Yeah.
and work. And actually, it's like, even if I was to ask you, Rana, if I was to ask Louise, what do you do? Or you were to ask, you kind of go, well, maybe this. Or if someone asked me what Ian does, I'm like, well, I've got my one-liner.
Yeah.
This is what he does. And if your life partner cannot go into detail about what you do and how that may then impact on who you are as a person, your mental health, da 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 da, then as societies, we just don't really
Yeah.
understand. So I think there's just a lot more space for us to find freedom through a greater level of empathy, of understanding, of listening to people, and just sharing.
Yeah.
You know,
It makes such a big difference, doesn't it? Because in the sharing, we remove the assumption.
yeah,
Because actually
absolutely.
it's clarified that it might
Yeah.
not be what we thought it was.
Exactly.
I'm conscious of our time.
I told you I could speak for
No, it's good. It's all good stuff. We're not so pressed that I need to
Okay.
fast forward us completely. But I would like to ask, given you've said, you know, with the anxiety attacks, particularly, it's only the last couple of years. It's been, you mentioned earlier, 47 years to get to where you are. All these different, you know, spending time with your 7-year-old self, 11, 14, 15-year-old self. Given all of that work, what is something you still have to consistently find freedom from?
It's really interesting because it's changed now. So what I need to, and this might not make sense initially, but what I need to find freedom from is getting into any kind of routines or behaviors that put me back into working too much or back into, and I've got these lovely, beautiful little reminders, and they're called my children. And, you know, just the last couple of weeks, I've been pulling some really quite long hours. There's been funding deadlines and conferences and all that kind of stuff. And a little voice peeps up, Mum, why are you coming home late again? It's like, oh yeah. So for me, it's look, I'm in no way, shape, or form. I don't believe in the world perfect. I don't like the use of the words happy, and everyone needs to be happy. No, we don't.
Yeah.
We are human beings and we should be experiencing all of our emotional range.
I have a theory about the word happy.
Go on.
I don't think it's an emotion.
It's just it's a complete
I think it's a collective term for the component emotions that we want.
Yeah.
But we lack the emotional maturity to name and understand.
See, I would go a step further. I would just say, I just want to be content.
Brilliant. I have so many people who, it comes out of their mouth and then they kind of feel it's not worthy enough. So they try and come back from it.
It's
content, to be content.
It's
Holy shit.
That's where I am.
Amazing.
I'm content. And that means my life is not perfect. It is not stable. It is not picture perfect. Do me and my family and my friends have tense moments and arguments, and do we? Yeah, of course we do. Have I taken the step to maybe distance myself from particular things that were making me less able to be my true self? Yes, I have. Was that hard? Yes, it was. Am I still living with reconciling some of that? Of course I am. However, that is part of being content. And that's why I hate the word happy. I hate the word happy. I mean, I see why we have happiness indicators and the world's happiest place to live, because it makes good headlines and it makes good stories. But
it stops us having to go deeper to understand it at a level that is really actually applicable.
Yeah. And I just think but the really important thing is contentment is not mediocrity.
Yeah.
It's not, because I am not someone who just settles for things.
It's not settling.
It's not settling for something. It's about kind of knowing that I've worked damn hard, as most people do, to get to where they are. And at that point, I'm not talking about status and titles. I'm just talking about, are we living comfortably? Are we able to reach out to people? You know, do we have a support network? And again, unfortunately, not everybody has that.
Yeah.
And I feel very, very privileged. I'm not going to say lucky, because I think we make our own luck, and I'm
fortunate,
hesitant.
maybe.
I think there's I'm feeling fortunate.
Distinction between luck and fortune.
Yeah, I think so.
Luck, I don't think we have any part to play in luck.
Yeah.
Good fortune, that's down to us.
Oh yeah, and I
create the opportunity to be fortunate.
I'm gonna dwell on that. That's gonna be my new words to dwell on.
Yeah.
Because you're right, and I think, and it's one of the reasons why I am so hesitant, is because there are so many people in this world, and I'm very aware that we are sitting here as two white people living in Surrey, very comfortable. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And I make no apologies for that. However, it is so important that, again, we do not make assumptions, that we actually that we take the time and that we use our positions to work with others. To, again, it comes back to to voices, to making sure as many voices are heard, as many situations are seen, as many bad bills or whatever they are challenged as, and we do that in so many different ways. But I am very, very aware that, as I say, even where we are living, there is so much diversity and there is so much social polarization and there is so much opportunity that is missed because of, just circumstance and where you are and generational kind of familial situations and and we do know, of course, it's down to who you're born and where you're born into, and but it is our responsibility, as I say, as people who have got a voice and can use that voice. Hence why the work I do with mental health swims, with that I do or I've done with Age UK Surrey, that I do, because I can use my skills. The research that I do is all about, how can we take, so one of my most recent research projects was how can we take virtual experiences of nature and being outdoors, because we know research categorically being outdoors in green and blue space, very good for our health. We know that. But how can we take that indoors? So I've been working and I've done research with care homes, with schools, with, just looking in areas where they are unable to be in these spaces physically, or they are least likely to be in these spaces. And so again, we can do this in a whole range of ways. We don't have to be, on the streets advocating and protesting. Yes, we can do that. And I've done that and I will continue to do that. And I've, it's a very, very visible and vocal way of doing that. But of course, we're not all comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
So it's about finding something that works for us and what we're comfortable in, because someone who is experiencing maybe a mental ill health is not able to be in the same way as someone who is neurotypical, or someone who has got a particular job is able to be in a way that somebody who has not got that job can be. And I just think it's about being sensitive to other people and others and not trying to pigeonhole everybody into the same box.
I mean, we've ended up a long way away from what you have to find freedom from.
Yeah.
Just quickly skipping back to that,
Cool.
just to clarify one thing, and then I'd like to ask you another question. With your finding freedom from the patterns of behavior that end up putting you in overwork, do you have a process that isn't just your kids, but that you can see it
responsibility just
Can you see it early? Because I think what often is very easy to happen is actually the first step isn't the problem. The second step isn't the problem. It's suddenly you're 10 steps down.
Yeah, and I think so. So I work part-time. So because of my experiences with COVID, I now work part-time. And one of the things that has really helped me, cat's back. One of the things that's really helped me, and this is going to sound just really bizarre, but has been being ill, because I know that if I work much more than I am at the moment, I will crash.
Yeah.
And the extreme fatigue and exhaustion and the muscle aches and the nausea and everything else will come back. And I can tell when I've done too much because I am in bed.
Yeah.
And I literally can't do it. So in terms of what can I do to stop that from happening, or what are the kind of that manage the triggers, I'm not really good at doing that, to be honest. I'm in my head, I'm kind of going, what would my other half say just now? Because he can see it.
Yeah.
And I'm not good at seeing it. And I think that's the first thing I need to do, is kind of say that actually often we are not, as individuals, we are not the people who see.
Yeah.
when we are being triggered or when we are being overwhelmed or, and
one of the things that has come out time and time and time again in our conversation is your reference to maybe not directly, but community,
yeah,
that
it's
support
huge.
to,
It's huge.
because it is very often
Yeah.
people around us who go, seriously, Caroline, come on, you've got
Yeah.
to take care of
You got to
yourself.
take care of yourself. And it's really interesting because I've always had lots and lots and lots of friends, acquaintances, and kind of come across people always go, my God, you know everybody. It's like, yeah, it's all very superficial.
Yeah.
It's all very superficial. I'm very fortunate in that I've got very good friends. Um, and I've got friends that I can be me with.
Yeah.
And I also have always had a mindset of people come and go out of our lives for reasons. So I think we're also in this kind of in society at the moment, we're in this thing, well, how long have you been friends? Oh, we've been friends since nursery school. Wow, well, that's wonderful. And it's wonderful
Yeah.
if you've got that. The reality is that that's not the majority of people.
No.
And yet somehow I can understand where people get a perception that if you've not got that, then
Yeah, I
you
think
know,
I think that's true across all relationships, and particularly romantic
yeah.
relationships. There's
How long
this,
have you been together?
yeah, and there's this expectation that you meet somebody and they are the one. And it's like, oh, come on, do me a favor. There are 8 billion people on this planet. What do you mean the one?
Exactly.
But and I'm not suggesting that relationships can't be forever.
No, of course not.
But my sister years ago introduced me to the phrase for a reason, a season, or forever.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, what's the reason this person was in my life?
Really, I like that. Yeah.
This person was a season of my life,
Yeah. Yeah.
or this person's forever. And it's like,
Yeah.
brilliant. And
Yeah.
if just accepting that, you were talking about being content. And for me, contentment is, or it is really helped by no longer fighting the inalienable truths, the way
Yeah.
the universe
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
It's like, it's going to work that way.
Yeah.
It can't do
And
anything about
not
it.
beating yourself up for the fact that it took you twice as long to get back to someone on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Or, the thing that will always happen to me now, and again, is in my head, I genuinely, in my head, I think I've responded to someone. I've done this to you before. In my head, I've responded to you. Oh shit, I've not.
Yeah.
And before, again, because of the way my brain is working, I'm like, oh, well, they hate me. That's it. I
Yeah.
can never speak to them again in my life. They're just like, oh my God. And that's it. I catastrophize everything. Whereas now it's like, no, I've just not responded to them.
Yeah.
And if I go back to them and go, look, I'm really sorry. I thought I'd responded to you. I hadn't. Da, da, da. Oh, look at that. The world hasn't ended.
Yeah.
And I think there's something about, and again, interestingly, we've not even touched on social media yet,
No.
which is, I
Don't-
was actually quite pleased at, but
Yeah.
I am going to, it will rear its head. But because we do live in this world that is so hypermobile, that is so hyper everything in many ways, that of course we've then seen the counter of that, which is the digital detox, which is we are now seeing, what country was it? Was it Australia? New Zealand? They're looking to ban smartphones for under 16-year-olds.
Yeah. I can't
Somewhere
remember
like
which
I
one.
can't remember which one. So we're actually seeing significant progression, or relatively significant progression, and actually going, you know what, these things don't control us, or they shouldn't
Yeah.
control us.
Yeah.
But actually, all of this kind of hyperness creates so much insecurity and doubt. And of course it does. And we hear this all the time. You just switch on a program, a podcast, or whatever. People are talking about this.
Yeah.
And yet we're addicted.
It's a fascinating one, isn't it? Because it's like our worst. It's not our worst, but the parts of how our brain works seem to have been co-opted to serve us least.
Yeah.
So that whole kind of old newspaper headline or TV news approach that was, if it bleeds, it leads. And the way clickbait works
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all these, and the way social media now, the
Yeah.
algorithms of social media work, it's almost like the power of our own that it takes to interrupt that.
Yes. Well, the thing is, all of this is based on psychology.
Yeah.
There is a reason why those little alerts that come up on our WhatsApp and our emails and everything are red. Because red means danger, red means alert, red means look at me right now. And so it demands us all the time. It's like if they were blue, you'd be like, meh, okay, I'll deal with that later. It's fine. But they're not. They're there. It's in its face. You look at, everything on social media. Of course, we know this because it's been in our lives for so long. It's about likes and engagements and how many followers have you got and I mean, research that I've done it's really interesting. A few years ago, I did some research all around I've researched in around social media for several years now, but we were doing this all kind of this switch to, it was a paper all about the brand value continuum, and it was about this switch to actually how we we are now the narrators and we are the content creators and so it's almost like we're doing this to ourselves now.
Yeah.
It's like these big platforms have kind of gone, okay,
Knock yourself out.
knock yourself out. And then we go, right, okay. And we've created this like insanely intense, fast, destructive, but often really quite constructive space.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. So I am neither for or against social media. I use it and it is used for so many positive things, whether that is advocacy, whether it is community building, whether it is friendship development, whether it is, I mean, taking it to its real core. I mean, social media, of course, is not just Instagram. It is not just Snapchat. It is, your YouTube, anything that is interactive in that sense becomes social media. And so actually we are seeing it building communities. We're seeing it being, supporting education. We're seeing it supporting, health and interactions and knowledge, not Dr. Google. I'm obviously not talking about Dr. Google, but hopefully, obviously. But actually building it, and we see support groups and we see, the mental health swims, for example, that is all Instagram based. We've got a community of almost 2,000 for French and mental health swims, and that's built through social media. So there is so much positive that can come from it. Yet it's the dark side.
Almost like the fact that it has been created by humans, for humans, populated by humans, that in some way means there's some nuance to it.
Yeah.
Because we as humans are deeply nuanced. And that, I think, for me, is one of the things I resent. Do I resent? It's one of the things I most actively dislike. I'm trying to find where I land on it. Most actively dislike is the oversimplification of deeply nuanced and complex ideas and how you're dragged it with clickbait and things like that is like, oh, do me a favor. I'm immune to clickbait. There is beyond the reaction
of research. There is decades of psychology, of sociology, of science, and it goes into this. It is playing on the very essence of what makes us human.
Yeah.
And it elevates certain parts of, so there is a huge, of course, addictive competitive element to it. There's a huge kind of, element of, oh, you've got to be seen.
Kind of virtue signaling in
some my purpose, if I'm not seen, I'm not here. What is my validity? What is my value? And I think what's also very interesting is that, and again, this is kind of moving into where my research is going, is that space where there is so much done in terms of everyone just does technology. So I'm a professor of technology and society, and you look at a lot of the research that's done on tech and the way we engage with tech, and it's all done with 18 to 24-year-olds. It's the big, well, it's not all done, of course, it's not all done, but they take a big chunk. But actually, we are seeing more research. So we talk about digital inclusion, digital divides. We talk about, the very fact there's still significant percentages of our population and significant areas of our population who are digitally excluded. Just simple things like people run out of data.
Yeah.
Not everybody
Well,
is
there's
on.
adverts on.
Yeah.
You've got mobile phone networks now targeting those people.
Yeah. So not everybody is connected
Yeah.
all the time. So we have digital exclusion and digital inequality, just as we have social inequalities, just as we have people, using and needing food banks, just as we have all of these really quite forgotten and often ignored in society.
Yeah.
It's real. And just because the people with voices tend to have that, and this is what it does. It really frustrates me. It angers me. It makes me upset because, I think about where I've come from and where I was born and where I was brought up. There was, the levels of poverty were relatively high. You know, the west coast of Scotland was not known for its affluence.
Yeah.
It's not known for its wealth, and particularly around kind of the Paisley, Glasgow area where I was brought up. And I go back there now, and it's progressed an awful lot, and Glasgow's a really vibrant city, but we're also seeing there are still these real pockets of poverty, and so it's about how can we actually, when we talk about, and I've forgotten what the original question was, to be honest with you, but how can we bring this more to the fore? How can we actually make people realize that that where people are digitally excluded, that we don't all have access, that we don't all have inclusion. That again, that's another reason why I volunteer and do the things I do.
Mm.
Yeah, okay, it's once a week, once a fortnight, but that doesn't need to, you don't need to quit your job to change the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. We all have to survive and earn a crust at the end of the day, but there are little things that we can do.
Yeah. Fascinating. I think all of this stuff is, you and I clearly could just keep talking for probably ever.
Probably a long time, yeah.
I've got two more questions.
Right, go on. I'll try and keep them concise.
Is, so we've done the freedom from.
Yep.
What are you creating freedom to?
So this comes back to actually what you talk about in your book. I'm creating freedoms to be able to make the most of the rest of my life. That's what I want to be able to do. And by that, I don't just mean selfish me. I mean as in me, my family, my friends. So you could reduce that and say, okay, I'm going to create a freedom from my current employment because I want to make sure I've got holidays and I want to make sure I've got, but actually I want to create freedom so that people around me, and maybe not even people I know, but feel that they can then have the space to create their own opportunities as well. And what do I mean by that? I don't want my kids, for example.
Full stop.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes. But I don't want them to kind of say, okay, well, I feel that I've got to do this because society tells me I've got to do this to be successful.
Yeah.
I was, if they want to go and do something that is maybe seen as a little bit edgy or a little bit different, have the confidence to go and do that. Have the freedom to choose what it is you really, really for you, for your soul, for your heart, whatever you want to call it, that is going to make you content, that's going to make you live a life that is going to give you contentment and joy, but it will bring you sadness because we know that you cannot have love without sadness. They are not they're not mutually exclusive. And so that's what I would like. And I don't just mean for my kids. I mean, and that's going to make me sound kind of, oh, anything I can do to help anybody, but it's not like that. It's just, it's freedom from stereotypes. It's freedom from constraints. It's freedom from anything that makes you feel that you have to do something.
Yeah.
Even though the alternative is legal. It is, obviously we're all like working within confines naturally, but yeah, just because
It sounds so. All of those, interestingly, I think it's often easier to define a freedom from, which is what you've said,
yeah,
freedom
yeah,
from
yeah,
those things. And what I'm getting is it comes back full circle to you saying you're embodying your true self. It is
yeah,
that
absolutely.
freedom to choose based on what's best for you. And that isn't a selfish thing, because what's best for us can also be best for other people.
Exactly.
But actually what's best for us could be the supporting of other people
And that's
into
exactly it.
their
Yeah.
own opportunities, which is what you just said.
That's what exactly what I mean. So for me to be able to support my friends, support my family, I I need to have that space, that contentment, that confidence to be able to be my true self,
Yeah.
which will then allow me to be able to support them,
Yeah.
to create a space where they can be seen, where they can be witnessed, and where I can support them in whatever way they maybe need me to do that. Now, of course, I'm answering all of this in my kind of a very personal context. If you had asked me that in my context of my profession or a particular role that I have, I may answer that slightly differently,
Yeah.
but not fundamentally. And this is what I think is really important, is that if we are able to apply, and I'm not saying I've got, in no way, shape, or form, I'm saying I've found a magic solution or anything like that, because everybody's solution is different. Um, and but I think fundamentally, if I'm able to take that and take that into each area of my life, so in my role as professor, one of the things that, and as vice dean, one of the things that I really want to do, and I'm already in my role at Brunel, I've not even been there a year yet, but already I feel that I'm able to support, to create opportunities, to make change. You're right, what's happening?
Cheeky neighbour's cat just walked
The
in.
neighbour's cat's
It's
in.
just sat there looking at us now. Sorry to
Really?
interrupt you. Yeah,
That's
just this side of. So we're sat next to where Terry has her food. If you weren't here,
the neighbour's cat
the
would be
neighbour's cat would be
eating.
hoovering.
Cheeky cat.
Cheeky bugger.
Cheeky, cheeky.
I've just got to keep an eye on.
Yeah, no, you keep an
Yeah.
eye on that because you've
Yeah.
got to protect the food.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think that's what it is. And I suppose what we're talking about at the end of the day is kind of our values,
Mm.
And what the values that we currently live by, or the opinions that we currently live by, they if we don't firmly believe in them, we can change. We do have the power to change them. And I think this is what kind of you come down to in your book and in your own thinking, is that we have a responsibility, not necessarily to make sure the change happens. So for example, I keep coming back to, in my head, and this kind of if I was, as so many thousands of people are in the UK, if I was unable to work full time, if I was a single parent, if I wasn't living where I'm living. And I always try and bring it back to that, because change and choice, unfortunately, is still sometimes a privilege.
Yeah.
And we live in a world where that is the case.
Yeah. It's a really interesting one, because I do believe there is a choice in every moment.
Mm.
But actually, one of my earlier guests, Chris Abbey, posed a little choice conundrum, which at the time I didn't articulate my response to very well. There is a choice in every moment. You don't get to choose what that choice is.
No. And that's exactly the
You will
point.
be presented with things that happen. They will come with choices as to what you do and how you react to
But
it.
it's not your choice as to what those choices are.
100% not.
And it's almost like, if you take it back to a really kind of simplistic analogy, it's like, remember those choose your own adventure stories? You never chose your own adventure. You never did.
Yeah.
You chose the adventure that the author had preset for you. And I suppose in many ways, that's what society and structures and governance and regulations and policies and legislation and laws and, whether we like it or not, class and stereotype and everything that we've been talking about today, fundamentally, we're talking about freedom, but a lot of freedom for a lot of people is bound.
Yeah.
And it's constrained and it's relative and it is a choice within constricted choice.
And I think the other thing to bear in mind is also when we take action to create change, a lot of people approach it from, I want to make one move, one change, and everything's
And then that's
evolved.
it.
And it doesn't work that way. These are small incremental
It's okay.
small incremental changes, which to begin with, they probably don't look like they're shifting the dial. They probably don't look like we're changing our circumstances, but we are.
Yeah.
And if we can consistently recognize there is choice, might not be the choices we want. It might be the choice between two things we would rather not have, but one of them begins to move us
better than the other.
Then I think we're in a situation where we can start.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? That where we have choice, maybe what it is that where we have choice, it is our responsibility to consider those choices and make the one that is going to be better for us.
Yeah, completely agree.
And so again, there's always a caveat, isn't it? Because actually when we move into that space, and we've talked quite a lot, either directly or indirectly, around mental health and mental ill health. And when we live and because we live in such a complex society and because mental health is still nowhere near fully understood and nowhere near, I'm actually gonna, it's not even fully, shouldn't even be in that sentence. Then actually we've got all of these other variables and all of these other factors that come into the word choice, which then come back to, well, what do we actually mean by choice?
Yeah.
So
really interesting. And again, each of I only have 4 questions, but they're so expansive.
They're hugely so.
I love them. But it's a nice little segue into the final question, which is, in the world of self-help and personal wellness and personal spiritual development, I get very frustrated by people say the one thing you need to do is like, fuck off.
Yeah.
There are myriad.
There's so many different
We've covered it today.
Yeah, exactly.
What works for one person isn't going to work for another. So I'm asking everybody to propose something that someone could do if they find themselves lost, stuck, or feel like they need more freedom.
So this is going to be, actually, this is probably one of the easiest. For the first time, I'm going to actually give you a very clear answer.
Okay.
And I'm saying this not because I volunteer with them, but because I know how much it has changed the lives of so many people. Because every single person who has come along to our mental health swims program, literally, sometimes it's like taking them 2 years to lead up to coming. And because when you're living in a space where you do feel lost, you do feel alone, where you maybe feel isolated, anything takes a lot.
Yeah.
A huge amount. And we can both empathize with that because we've both been there. And it does take a lot. So we've had people who literally, who it's taken them 2 years to build up the confidence to drive, or we have to drive to where we get to, where we swim. And it is to just reach out to something like mental health swims, or to reach out to something that connects with you as an individual. It could be art, it could be a science thing, it could be a choir, it could be anything, but something that is just different. Or reach out to, you know, someone who you think might not want to hear from you, you know, because I think, and what I mean by that, of course, if you know, there's all sorts of caveats that go with that, but you know, I was saying earlier about, oh, I've not WhatsApped that friend. They're not going to want to talk to me. Try and dial down that voice. And you know what? If they don't come back to you,
It's not about you.
it's not about you. It's really not. And it's these tiny, tiny, giant steps that,
I love that.
Yeah, that's to my mind what makes a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Caroline.
No, thank you for having me. I've really
It's been
enjoyed
really
it.
good. And
Really
as I said,
enjoyed
we
it.
clearly could have gone on
Yeah, we could have gone
for far longer.
Thank you everyone for your patience.
Yeah, well, there's so much in it though that
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with long podcasts
Yeah.
at all. So thank you very much, Caroline.
You're very welcome.
Where, if people wanted to get in touch over any of the things that you do, because we haven't really spent any time talking about your art. I'm looking at a piece of your art on our wall. Where can people find you, find your work?
See, this is the part already I've gone that whole kind of like, oh my God, you know, so my art is on Instagram. I'm at Caroline Ross Art. Again, different names for different things. If anyone wants to see any of the work I do for my research, my academic work, it was Professor Caroline Scarles, which is Scarles. And if you Google that, because it's a very unusual name, then I will come up. But yeah, through the Brunel website. And if you are interested in kind of mental health swims, again, they've got a website as well. But
what's the name of the mental health?
It's just called Mental Health Swims. Okay. And then there's about 150 different locations all over the UK. So there will be one near somebody. So yeah. Brilliant. And they're all very welcoming, open, inclusive, safe spaces. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much for coming. And thank you very much, everybody, for listening and watching. I would love to hear your thoughts on this conversation and any other conversations that I have had with my guests. If you want to share your thoughts, best way to get in touch with the show is by email, handsupifyou'rehuman@gmail.com. Please rate, review. Please share this episode or any of the previous episodes with people who you think would benefit. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Until then, thank you again, Caroline.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
But until we next speak, I wish you a peaceful and joyful few days, and I will speak to you soon after I've chased the neighbour's cat out of the kitchen. Take care. Thank you very much.